Hello out there. Today we got a kind of rare machine again. This is an edging saw, or an edger. These were used at almost every circular sawmill back in the day, or every sawmill in general. In the later days, or I guess I should say in the more modern times, these machines were kind of incorporated into the main saw. So the purpose of this thing is for the first few boards that come off, you'll have bark on both sides, and then later on you'll have bark on one side. And so anyway, instead of wasting the time of putting these boards back on the big main saw just to cut the little edges of bark off, you can do the operation on this thing. This has two blades, two small blades about 1 foot in diameter, and one is fixed and the other one can move from about 3 inches all the way to 12 or 14 or so on this one. You can also use it to resaw. If you have a wide board, you can split it to whatever you want. And so these machines are very valuable when you find them and they're in good shape, because they save a lot of time that would otherwise be burnt on passing little thin boards over the big saw. You can do it in like a gang style as well on the big saw. You can clamp a whole bunch together and do one pass. But if it's a multi-person operation, the person taking the board off the main saw can flip it over and put it on this machine and send it out to someone who gets the final product on the far side and stacks it in the yard. So I've never run this thing. It came from a place in Quebec. The only markings on it are Moody on this pair of bearings there. So Moody was a big company in Terrebonne, Quebec. They made threshing mills, all kinds of good stuff. It's got a wooden frame, which is surprisingly in very good shape. It's been cut. I wouldn't say it's split from time, but it's been cut right in the center there, so that's not ideal. But I have it level enough here, and the top boards are in good enough shape that it'll be structurally it's well sound. Everything's held together by a kind of stay bolt type things. They're threaded rods with washers to hold everything tight together. And all the woodwork's done with mortise and tenon, so everything's kind of inset for good strength. I got 2 belts. Oh, why is this pail here? Well, it doesn't have to be. It's just to cover the paper pulley. I don't want that staying out in the wet. So the whole thing, because I'm a little bit low on space in buildings, is staying outside. That's why it's so dark. I coated in oil. But this is the paper main drive pulley. And paper is a very good material for belt work and friction and stuff, but as soon as you start getting it wet and dry, it goes all spread apart and falls into disrepair. So this one's good. We're going to use it, but I keep the pail over it just to protect it. So I've already gone ahead and oiled the heck out of this thing. I filed the teeth very quickly. They're extremely worn out. The teeth on these, or the bits, are the same idea as the big sawmills, circular sawmills. They're replaceable. You can get replacement saws for these that are carbide as well to last a little bit longer, but especially if you use the same bits on the edger and your big saw, it kind of makes sense for an operation. So let me give you a close-up here. So here's the guts of the machine. The main shaft, your drive pulley, this little cast iron pulley on the end. I'm not sure what its purpose was. It was probably to drive another piece of equipment in the mill. These arms that come across here normally have like chain links hooked to them and a big arm, so that by default there's just a little gap in between the rollers. So they're really optimized for 1-inch boards, but you can cut 2-inch with this as well, but often you need to raise these rollers to kind of help the board get sucked in at first. So that's why these are here. Also, the weight of these rollers kind of crimps the board and tries to prevent it from being kicked back. But that is one problem that I'll have to remedy on these on this machine. Boards did kick back, and that was pretty rough when that happened, because if you can imagine, it's coming through here, something binds up a little bit, and this saw, which is spinning awful fast, throws the board out, and you're hoping no one's standing in the way there. There's lots of old gruesome old stories of people getting nailed by flying boards that come out of the kickback of the edger saw or whatever. So that's I'll build a little kickback preventer that bolts on the front of this. That's no big deal. So for the bits here, I just did a couple little passes to take the rust off, but if you can see, there's almost like just a 1/4 inch or so left of them. They should stick out way to here. So these are worn out. They're still wider than the blade itself, which you need so it doesn't rub, and it'll be okay for the moment. But those will have to be replaced in the not so far future. Also, this collar, you can see there's a little bit of play because the key is worn out. I'll replace that key. This collar is guided by 2 blocks of wood in this notch. And so when you adjust the lever at the far end to set the width, the wear surfaces are these blocks of oil doused hardwood. So as they wear out and you get slop, you just take them out, put a new one in. This machine is still all set up on Babbitt bearings. The main bearings have had added greasers, and everything else, these guides, you have to give a little shot of oil on the tops and bottoms, and this whole funky linkage, it's like an accordion link of gears. That's just to transmit power from the bottom to the top so that this roller is always kind of sucking the board through once it gets through here. This one is just a smooth roller that freewheels. On the bottom, that one's a powered roller by the big gear on the far side, and I'll show you how that works. Main shaft has a belt here, or a pulley. Goes to this little guy, little pinion gear to this big one, and then the big gear has this one. Oh, and I see there's a crack there now. Not the end of the world. It's also a missing tooth. That guy might need a little bit of help. And then that transmits power to the far side, and then the little accordion gear goes to, so that both of these are powered rollers. You can also see on the bottom that collar, and that's the linkage that moves that one saw. So if we follow this arm, which has a pivot right there to the back, here's your adjusting lever. So this is at the far limit, at the widest it can go, and then you can slide it all the way down. Something's out of calibration because it's resisting going to the farthest notch there, so no big deal. But if you look at it from here, you can see that thing slide. Let me give you a shot of the blades. You just saw this pulley that drives the feed. There's no belt there, so I went ahead and made one up. Use the old diagraph stencil machine to make little labels so I didn't forget or use this belt for something else. It's cut undersize as they should be so that when they stretch they still keep good tension. But as I mentioned before, I oil the heck out of this machine because it sits outside. I don't want the wood to rot or anything to rust. Obviously you don't want any oil on your pulleys. So this one already has a wrapping of belt material and it doesn't have oil on it. This one does, so I'm going to go ahead and use this CRC parts cleaner and degreaser. Give that a good dose and wipe her down just on this pulley. Just on that, because the rest I want to keep the oil on, but no oil on this face. There's a whole bunch there. Look at all that oil just seep down. And that dries right up quick. Maybe one more blast. It's a good measure. Now that'll be good and dry for the belt. A little bit of rag residue, but that's fine. That's fine. So, we put on the belt now. Normally it's easiest to put it on the smallest one first and to kind of roll it, watching your fingers of course. Roll it from the top down. It'll stretch. There you go. Lots of tension in that we need, that's good. And it'll kind of find its happy place, find its center. So now all we're missing is power and the main drive belt. Here's the plan. There's the machine. We've got a belt. This is a proper endless belt. There's no lacing on this, which is good. For paper pulley, I wouldn't want the lacing to kind of start to wear it out. Now this saw is meant to run while the main mill is running, so its orientation would have the belt come off and go back to the main shaft of the mill so that the person on the unloading side could take the board and put it right on and then fire it out. So there would be a belt here, so typically you wouldn't cross this. I believe this mechanism, you could reverse it. You could put the belt, you could spin the whole thing around because it's symmetric, the frame is anyway. So we're just going to set it up like this. The belt line will be right about here, so I'll go ahead and get the tractor going, put some water in it, park it right here. That's a good and long belt, my. The tractor, the top of the pulley goes forward, which would be this way, so that's backwards, so I'll have to put a twist in the belt. Drama queen. Now the clips that you just saw are all well and good if you want to make a bunch of twigs and toothpicks. The real purpose of this thing, I'll show you now, is to deal with stuff like this. These are offcuts from last time I had a bandsaw mill in. And bandsaws are a little bit, you can use them to edge, but they take a bit more effort to set up. So this plank, which is scrap really, has these two edges. There's good material up to about 5 inches here and only about 3 inches here. So you could get a clean plank if you edge this to 3 inches here. We'll do a couple passes just to put some time in on the machine. The same thing with this one. You could cut it off back here and still get a good 5-inch plank just for making trinkets or little things, because all this wood is complete waste if you don't do anything with it. Might as well pass it through one of these machines and be able to do something. Well, what a good day. What a good day. Machine worked exactly how it was supposed to do. I was skeptical at first if it would handle the ash or if it was gonna maybe hang up because of how dull the bits were. But it seems like the boards took lots of the rust off, and it should have also been running faster. Those of you familiar with saws probably say, holy gee, sounds running slow. Well, it probably was, partly because the 1020 doesn't turn that fast, but also because that pulley's big, so I could have shifted the belt onto the smaller pulley to get a bit more speed. But when it's set up with the mill, I'll just have to correct the size of pulley on the main shaft to be plenty big to spin this fast. But it had no problem doing the two cuts at the same time on the ash, so that's great. The next test, I definitely need to put more tension in the belt and stuff, would be for 2-inch board. That would be a little bit more of a stressor, but first I need a frame with a lifting arm to raise the top pieces. I'm sure you would have noticed a couple times I had to really give the board a good shove in to get through. And then build that kickback protector I think I mentioned, with some little spikes so that if it ever does fire out, it'll kind of jam up in the spikes. But I'm awful happy with that. It's been, who knows how long it's been since this thing ran, probably 50 or 60 years if I was to warrant a wild guess. But yeah, no, this is good. It's great. Stay tuned for more tinkering, more projects, old machines, and till then, have a good one.